When someone initially told me about fasting, I really didn't think anything of it. I thought it was a fad. I'm like, fasting, what is that going to do? You're just skipping meals. It didn't make sense to me, and it kept coming up over and over and over again till I finally just took a look at it. And once I really understood what it is, it turns out that fasting, especially intermittent fasting, is the single best thing you could do for your health, the most powerful thing you could do for weight loss. It is the cure for so many problems, including cancer. And that is because it addresses the deeper root cause of most health problems, which is insulin resistance and mitochondrial damage. So wherever you're at, I'm going to show you how to transition into this as slowly and as fast as you want. So what is this intermittent fasting? It's not a diet. It's just a pattern of eating and not eating. You're mimicking what your body was designed to do. Our bodies were not developed or designed to have food 24/7. And that leads to weight gain, inflammation, and destruction of the brain cells and the immune system. So if we reverse this thing and just eat less frequent, all sorts of magical things happen. At a deeper level, you're manipulating certain hormones. You're lowering your insulin, which is going to help you to tap into your fat cells. Anytime insulin is high, fat cannot be accessed. You must lower insulin to tap into your fat cells. And if you really understand this, it's pretty simple of how you should lose weight, right? You want to adjust these hormones. You want to keep insulin as low as possible. And then the other hormone, growth hormone, we want to activate that. It just so happens that growth hormone gets activated with fasting. And just so you know, one of the best indicators to know that this is working is when your appetite goes away. Now think about that for a second. Appetite goes away. Isn't that like a huge barrier to trying to stick to any program? If you weren't hungry all the time, wouldn't it be a lot easier? And the answer is yes. The next benefit that I personally like the most is cognitive benefits. My brain works so much better when I do intermittent fasting. I had no idea before how much this frequent eating was destroying my brain and keeping me in a brain fog. Like I felt like I had a helmet on my head all the time, like this heavy like cloud, and I just couldn't wake up. So from the brain level, intermittent fasting is really awesome. And this is going to help you focus, help your concentration, help your memory. And then the other thing that this does is it raises your mood. If you were depressed before, if you had anxiety, you're now not going to have that anymore. I'm not sure if you saw this video. I'm going to put the link down below, but it's a fascinating story of this person who wanted to commit suicide. Okay, they were extremely depressed. And the way that he was going to kill himself is by starving himself to death. So he goes in his room, locks the door, and he just lies on the bed. Day 1, he wakes up. He's still not dead. Day 2, he wakes up. He's still not dead. Day 3, he wakes up. He's feeling good. He's feeling actually no longer depressed. He unlocks the door, walks out, and says, what's going on? Why do I feel so good right now? I'm not going to kill myself. He started looking up on the internet things about fasting and what happens when you don't eat, and he stumbled on this fasting thing. And he stumbled on my website. Anyway, he lost a lot of weight. He no longer is depressed. He's no longer suicidal. He's a much happier person. He has this huge success story. And it all started with this miraculous fasting. So fasting can help you fix your brain. Realize, as a side note, fasting is not starving. That's different. Starving is when your body is starting to eat up your muscle protein and different organs, and you pretty much ran out of your fat. See, the fat on your body is there to help you survive when you are not eating, okay? Let that sink in for a little bit. When you don't eat, your body is not going to directly go after your muscle as energy. It's going to go after your fat as energy for a period of time until that's gone. Then it'll use the muscle. That's when you're starving. But what you need to know is that a lot of people have a lot of extra fat that it's going to take a long time before you get to the muscles. In fact, an average person has roughly over 100,000 calories of stored energy in their fat cells. An average person that's not overweight, 100,000 calories. So just so you know, you're not going to starve if you skip a couple meals. But what's really kind of funny is when someone starts fasting and they're like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to go this many hours without eating, right? And so they eat this huge meal, like because they think it's going to be their last meal. But here's the thing. Once you get used to it, after a couple days, it becomes easier and you start seeing the results and you have more confidence. You're not going to starve to death. Emotionally, you're going to be happier. Number two, your immune system is going to be better. Now, I'm going to be talking about prolonged fasting a little bit and what that can do. That's like fasting for a couple days or longer. Boy, that can completely increase and help you generate stem cells for the immune system. So you're literally regrowing a new immune system, which is fascinating. The other really cool thing about fasting is you can generate this condition of autophagy. Autophagy means self-eat. So basically, your body cells are cleaning up old, damaged cells and rejuvenating them and recycling them into new cells. So it's kind of like a garbage disposal on steroids. You start cleaning everything up and then you're generating new cells. And this is why when people do fasting, especially routine, consistent intermittent fasting, it's definitely anti-aging. You start looking younger, your skin, your joints, inflammation goes down. And so that's another point, inflammation. I mean, think about how many diseases and conditions have inflammation. Heart disease, autoimmune disease, arthritis, they all have inflammation. All right, another benefit is that when you do intermittent fasting, you're going to save a lot of money on your grocery bills because you're not eating all these snacks. You're eating less frequently. And I calculated an average person could save anywhere between $100 to $300 to up to $600 a month just on eating less of these foods. Now, I do want to point out that this is not just about cutting calories. However, when you do intermittent fasting, the need for food becomes less and your body becomes more efficient. So you can get by on less calories. Your nutrient requirements are less because your body has adapted. And when we talk about weight loss and a slow metabolism, fasting does not slow the metabolism. It repairs this thing behind the metabolism, behind that set point that you might attempt to lose weight and like hit a certain plateau and you can't get anything less than that. That's your set point. And that's controlled by insulin resistance. So once you fast for a period of time, you can correct that and actually lower that set point. So basically you're repairing your metabolism when you're doing fasting because behind this slow metabolism is this insulin issue. Remember, insulin is the key factor that determines whether you're going to burn fat or not. So we can actually lower our overall average insulin levels. Now, the other thing that's cool about fasting or eating less frequently is that it's going to give you a lot of extra time because you're not constantly feeding yourself and preparing meals. So that's kind of cool. And then also, another big benefit is it gives your digestive system a chance to reset. So it's not constantly having to work 24/7 because you're cramming all this food down your throat. So you have less bloating, less inflammation in the gut, and that alone is huge. Okay, so here's the starting point. Let's say you're on 3 meals a day plus snacks, okay? The first thing to do, step one, eliminate snacks. That includes eating snacks at night and grazing. We no longer want to graze. 3 meals, okay? That's step one. If you just did that, you would improve the body, okay? Step two, skip your breakfast. Now, you can do this gradually or suddenly, but I think I kind of skipped something because to make this really easy, it would help to go on a low-carb diet. It's not a necessity. It will help. It's a different thing. So I do want to just talk about that because when you lower your carbohydrates, it allows you to tap into more fat because you lower insulin, because the two things that increase insulin is frequent eating and carbs. So if you lower your carbs, it's going to be easier to skip that breakfast in the morning because you go to bed and then all night long you're fasting, okay? And then you wake up and then the question is, are you really hungry? Probably not, but we just eat out of this habit or tradition. We've been told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, which is a complete lie made up by people who sell food for breakfast. But typically if you do this, you wake up, the hunger is gone, you go as long as you can. Let's say when you're just starting out, you can only go till 10 o'clock in the morning. Well, then have your breakfast then, or 11. You keep doing this until you push that breakfast into your lunch and it becomes one meal. I typically have my first meal as a breakfast type thing, or like maybe like I'll do eggs or bacon and something like that. But you don't have to do that, okay? So now you're, let's say at 12 o'clock, you have your noon, your first meal. The second meal, let's say it's at 6. Now you're at 2 meals a day. So between 12 and 6 gives you a 6-hour eating window and a 18-hour fasting window. So you could pretty much stay at this pattern. It's very easy to do. You get a lot of benefits. For most people, this is what they do, and it's fun. But let's say we want to lose weight faster. Let's say we're not getting all the benefits out of this. Number 3 is to shorten these 2 meals to a 4-hour eating window. That gives us 20 hours of fasting. Wow, you're going to get more benefits from this, more weight loss, less belly fat. So you basically just push your lunch farther in the afternoon. Let's say it's at, I don't know, at 2 o'clock. Okay, then you eat at 6 o'clock. So that will give you a 4-hour eating window. But you can also just eat at 12 and then push your dinner to 4. So there's different options depending on what you want to do. And I do want to point out this eating window. Typically people will think that, oh, it's just a window I can eat like constantly. Well, if you just didn't do that and just had like 2 meals, like starting at, let's say at 12 and 4, and not have any snacks in between, you can get more benefit. However, when you're first starting out, don't worry about that. Let's just make it simple. Just eat what you want in that eating window, but just keep that as your eating window. So you have this 20 hours of fasting. All right, so 20 hours of fasting will give you a whole bunch of additional benefits. But let's just take it to the next level. Let's do OMAD. That means 1 meal per day. That gives you about 23 hours of fasting with a 1-hour eating window. I believe that anyone over the age of 50 should be doing this because as you get older, you don't need as much food. You're not going to be as active. And 1 meal seems to be fine. And you get this 23 hours of fasting, which produces a lot of amazing benefits. There's something else I want to add to this. It's called periodic prolonged fasting. So now, if we do this consistent pattern of intermittent fasting, and then we add in here periodic prolonged fasting. So now you're fasting for 2 days, or 3 days, or 4 days, or 5 days, or 7 days, or longer. Probably the biggest thing would be to really give yourself a chance to stimulate your stem cells for kind of immune rebuilding, or to repair your brain, or to really handle like arthritis or some type of health problem. And cancer. Out of all the things that you can do for cancer, prolonged fasting is hands down the most powerful thing you can do for cancer. In fact, I talk about this a lot in other videos that you might have to find on Rumble because I took them down. But there's a gentleman that had stage 4 prostate cancer, stage 4. They told him to go home and die. So he started to gather all sorts of information and he did all sorts of things, but the thing that really made the difference for him is a prolonged fast, like a long fast. He was able to reverse this situation, get rid of his stage 4 cancer, which is very, very serious, and he's still alive years later. And he has an entire YouTube channel, and I'll put his link down below. But he has since wrote a book about it, and he has done a lot of things. And we even worked together to fund a scientific study, which is very expensive in Europe, to substantiate a protocol. And that's for a different video. But the point is that prolonged fasting is very, very powerful to kill cancer. Because when you fast, your genetics, your genes start aligning with survival in a big way. So in other words, our bodies in the past have starved many, many times. And so as a protective mechanism, when you mimic a little bit of starvation, all sorts of survival things kick in and all sorts of diseases go in remission. You upgrade certain genes to overcome all sorts of issues. Now, let's say, for example, we're doing the fasting and we want to even make it more powerful. We want to add a couple things. I already mentioned going on low carb. That's called the ketogenic diet. Okay. If you add that, it's going to really, really, really speed things up as well. I think the combination is the perfect blend because they both complement each other. Also, if you add exercise, you can just take things to the next level because all these actions enhance the same thing: lowering insulin, increasing growth hormone, causing more survival, creating more health in the body. I mean, when you think about it, when you go to the doctor, what are they doing to increase health? I'm not talking about suppressing a symptom. I couldn't come up with a lot of things. They don't really address this core foundation with eating. They don't usually address this fasting technique. They might talk about exercise in general, but it's really about handling all of the side effects from eating junk foods, alcohol, the effects of stress and all these other things. That's kind of what they're addressing. And I looked at this and I'm like, what is it about healthcare that can actually increase health? I think that's missing. Listen, don't get me wrong. If you break a bone, if you injure yourself, I mean, you need to go to the doctor. But this massive suppression of symptoms, I think the whole system is broken where we don't really focus as much on increasing health, which is a completely different thing. So an average person has a lot of insulin resistance. They have a lot of belly fat. They're overweight. They have a lot of inflammation. They have something called ectopic fat. That's fat that can no longer go in the fat cell. The fat cell is broken, so it spills over outside the fat cell in the organs, like your liver, and then around the organs as visceral fat. That's why you have belly fat. If you look down at your shoes right now and you see your belly sticking out, that means you have insulin resistance. A couple other things that you probably have heard that are completely false. This other concept that 6 meals a day is healthy. This idea that you have to eat to prevent hunger so you don't overeat is completely ridiculous, because if you eat these small meals, it actually causes you to be more hungry in about an hour and a half. So this is the perfect way to keep you eating, by eating small meals. Thus, the topic we're talking about, intermittent fasting, which means don't eat so often. And also this concept of everything in moderation. Just eat everything you want. There's no bad food group in moderation. This is complete, because every time we eat carbohydrates in moderation, we get into trouble. And in order to get into deep ketosis, which is the state of fat burning, you can do a moderate amount of protein, but not a moderate amount of carbohydrates. An average person consumes about 65% of their calories carbohydrate. And we already know that's not working. Okay, what about the topic of women doing fasting? And maybe you heard that it's bad for the thyroid. And there is some studies that show that the thyroid hormone, the active form, T3, does go down a little bit. But that does not mean the thyroid is dysfunctional, because the way that they diagnose hypothyroidism is not with T3. It's with this other hormone coming from the pituitary called the thyroid stimulating hormone. And that one in these studies is always normal, because what happens when you go on a low carb diet or you do intermittent fasting and you start burning fat and you start losing weight, your metabolism becomes healthier and the need for this T3 does go down. You don't need it as much because your body is burning fat more efficiently. All right, the next point you might hear is that, and I already mentioned this, like fasting is starvation, fasting is dangerous. It's actually dangerous to eat frequently. Okay, we've already done an experiment. We know that. It's super healthy to do intermittent fasting. There's a couple things I want to bring up about that though. Nutrition. If you're going into this with nutritional deficiencies, all you have to do is take certain nutrients to make sure that you're not deficient. The two main categories of nutrients that I recommend are the B vitamins, and you can get that from nutritional yeast, and electrolytes. Well, salt is part of electrolytes, but we'll just add a third, salt, because sometimes people don't think salt is electrolyte. So if you take these, you pretty much eliminate like keto flu, keto fatigue, keto rash, and some of the other things that might happen in this transitional step. You see, the purpose of food is to provide energy and nourishment. Mainly nourishment is the vitamins and the minerals and all these other things that we need. Well, we can take these without the calories, but what about fuel? If you're not eating, where's the fuel going to come from? Your fat fuel. You're actually eating when you're not eating. You're just switching to your fat fuel. A lot of people have a lot of fuel that they can't tap into. That's because their insulin's too high, because they're eating too frequently, their carbs are too high. Intermittent fasting is finally a way to tap into your fat and really use that as the primary fuel. This is what our bodies were designed to do, to use fat fuel when there's no food available. Now, as far as vitamins, is that going to knock you out of this fasting state? No. Vitamins are fine because they don't have calories unless you have vitamins that have sugar or things in them. Also, you can drink coffee, fine. You can have tea, water. It's totally fine. Just don't do things like juice and things with sugar in them. And then the last point that I want to bring up is that when you do this, this is a healthy action. You're going to heal your body from different angles. You're actually going to regrow muscle if you have atrophy because of growth hormone stimulation, which means that if you're going through this fat reduction, muscle growing action, you may plateau with your weight at certain times, okay? If this happens, don't think it's not working. It is working. Look at the size of your clothes. Focus on your appetite. Is your appetite gone? Give it more time to work and give your body a chance to adapt. And you now have the knowledge of how to turn up or turn down the diet based on these different patterns of intermittent fasting. Now, the next most important video for you to watch would be on what to drink, the liquids during fasting. If you haven't seen this video, I'll put it up right here. Check it out.